Hi everyone, my name is Paul Micarelli and I'm here with my son Paul Giuseppe, and we're here to talk about another topic today. And the last topic that I talked about was fear, and in that conversation I had mentioned that I originally wanted to talk about death, which is a very closely related topic, but I ended up talking about fear at the suggestion of my wife. But I'm going to swing back around and talk about death in this conversation because, like some of the other topics I've talked about, it is such a big and deep topic that just has, a lot there behind it. So we're going to try to just talk a little bit about it because it is such an important topic. And honestly, it's something that is not talked about enough in our society. And it's also often swept under the rug and avoided, in some cases. And it's weird because it's glorified in a lot of ways, and there's so much, graphic violence in media and entertainment. But, real death, real loss is something that as a society and as individuals, we don't really have a lot of training to cope with a lot of times. And my first topic that me and Paulie talked about was life. And obviously death is intertwined with it in a inseparable way. And really they aren't two things that are interconnected. It's one process, one eternal process of creation, destruction, regeneration, diversification, and it's really just a process that's been going on since the beginning of time, at least the beginning of life. And in a way, death, as far as destruction, has been going on since the beginning of time, since creation of our known universe, however that happened. And what we call death is a form of destruction. It's the destruction of the process that we identify with as life and being a living being, a human being, a person, or any living thing. And this is probably the happiest Paulie's been during one of our conversations as we're talking about death here, which is funny. I mean, obviously he doesn't know what we're talking about, but as scary and as grief-inducing and as horrible as death is a lot of times, it does help to keep a perspective on it, and sometimes even a little dark humor. Everybody's been affected by death at some time or another. The death of close relatives or loved ones, animals, people we know, friends, family, and ultimately it's something we have to face as human beings ourselves. Every single person that's ever lived on this planet has had to face death, and there's really no getting around it. So the question is, how do we face it? How do we attempt to understand it? How do we try to cope with it in the best way that we can? Because there really is no escaping it. So the one perspective that I try to keep is kind of like a cosmic perspective. The idea that life and death is this eternal process. It's something that has just been going on like the ebb and flow of the waves of an ocean, since life began as single-celled organisms. Now, it's very easy to say that, but our human experience doesn't really let us experience that completely, because we are caught up in ego, we are caught up in fear of loss of our own identity. This is what we, as this human process, we call it a human being, but really we're just a conglomeration of processes, and really that's the ultimate dissolution of everything we identify with. Everything we identify with is ourselves. I like to think that we are part of this larger universe. I believe in the unity of the universe. I believe that, we are literally just, the glimmer of sunlight off the waves of an ocean, and we are part of this eternal process. We appear to be separate. We appear to be an individual creation, individual being, person, but when you look really deep down into it, we are actually just part of the process. And death really faces us with that reality, and that's why it's so hard for people to face, because it's hard to look beyond our own ego or our own self-identity and realize that that's kind of an illusion. There's a lot of kind of the Eastern religions and mystery religions have talked about that and have tried to instill that in people, that sense of this is all just temporary. This is not a solid phenomenon like we believe it is. We're just a process. We're part of a process. And that's one way to kind of try to face death, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying for the individual ego and the individual perspective that we have. So again, I try to think from a cosmic perspective and look at just the ebb and flow of life on this planet. Things, growing, being born, dying, decaying, regenerating, and it's just nonstop, and it's infinite, really. In scope, you got plant life, bacteria life, animals, plants, bugs. Everything is just in this constant flux of life and death. And as much as we think of it as a binary phenomenon, life versus death, again, it's really just different parts of the cycle. So, these things, again, it's easy to rationalize and logically think that way, but when you sit, and one thing that's recommended is, meditation on death. And, I know my wife, Loretta, she teaches yoga, and we've practicing yoga for several years now, and the one thing that kind of goes throughout all the practices is the Savasana, the end of yoga, where you kind of lie in what's called corpse pose, and you kind of meditate on the activity you've done and how it's affected you, and just kind of let it all go at the same time. And part of that is, what I try to do is, you maybe laying in the dark or in the silence, and just try to meditate on this. What does it mean to, lose this physical body? And it's a very important meditation. And there's other, religions that do that. It seems like, a lot of Western religion just kind of accepts that there's an afterlife, and you don't, really have to dwell on it too much or really consider what happens. People just assume you go to heaven, or you become one with God and meet the white light and see all the people who died before you, and that's it. And I don't like to take anything for granted. I don't like to just take what people tell me. I really like to think about things for myself. And death is the big mystery. It's the one thing that we all experience, but we all will never really be able to know in this lifetime and be able to express to other people. So it is the big mystery. Life is a mystery, but it's a mystery we can at least experience and relate. Death is the mystery that we can't relate. And because of that, it has so much symbolism, so much, meaning in culture to our individual psyches. And, culture, there's so much symbolism of death, for good and for bad, for all kinds of different purposes. Some people use it to kind of instill fear, instill, just primal emotions. Death imagery is used for hope. It's used to kind of evoke the afterlife, the possibility of a new beginning. Like I said, life and death is this constant regenerative process. So a lot of times, death is used to kind of give hope to people, and the fact that this life isn't all there is. There's something afterwards, something our spirit, this energy that flows through us, that animates us, transmutes into beyond this world. My personal kind of feelings on it and views on it is that, like I said, I do think we are part of this one giant unity, this huge quantum field, or God field of energy that is just flowing throughout the whole universe and is the whole universe. And I think, once this physical body kind of stops working and all these processes kind of fall apart, then maybe that energy just uploads back into the overall field and merges with it in a way that we can't really comprehend, logically. But maybe all this information that we're gathering, everything that we've experienced, everything that we've interacted with, somehow is uploaded into this information field. So we never really die. And I think that's kind of a positive way to look at it. I think that's kind of a realistic way to look at it. I think the idea of, going through the pearly gates and seeing like the ghosts of everybody, I mean, there might be some aspect of that is met in the afterlife, and the process of dying. But to me, it seems that it would be much more unlimited and infinite than that. But this is all speculation, obviously. Nobody really knows. So I would never disparage anybody who has a different view of the afterlife, or what the soul goes through. I've read every kind of philosophy and religion, and their view was on the afterlife. I know, like in Tibet, they believe that there's different stages, and it all depends on your mind state. And even Leonardo da Vinci said that, the cause is your life experience, and the result is at the moment of death, meaning that everything that you do, all your mental training, all your emotional training, every experience leads up to that point where you're ready to exit the body, and your soul kind of snowballs into the next thing. So I know we've, as a family, had a close experience with death when Paulie here was being born, and it was very scary. As I mentioned in our first video, I kind of touched on it, but when he was being born, Loretta's water broke and ended up having the cord go over his head. So he had like a prolapse cord like coming over his head, which turned our potentially challenging home birth into an emergency C-section that had to go to the hospital. So there was a period of time during that whole situation where I thought I might very well lose my son before I even got to meet him, and it was horrifying. And that kind of experience with death was eye-opening. It made me realize how much I do take life for granted, even though I really don't. I try to be aware of my own mortality constantly, and realize that not just me, but my family, my wife, the people I love, they could be gone at any minute, and people are only here for a certain amount of time. And I try to keep that perspective and keep love for everybody, and just realize that everybody's only here for a certain amount of time, and to realize that I got to appreciate this life and the lives around me as much as possible. But still, it's not till something like that kind of jars your experience that you realize how close death is at all times. And it's not something to be scared of. It's not something to be anxious and worry about. Really what it is a reminder to experience the here and now, and to keep your eyes open, and to keep your heart open, and live life to the fullest. And I plan to do that, with my son here. I've been doing it my whole adult life. I've had a few run-ins with death myself, and came very close to, dying several times. And it's a scary experience, but I have to say it's not as scary as, almost losing him before he was even born. So, it's one of these things, again, that I try to meditate on, and I think I would recommend every person, especially people who have a fear of death. I know my wife, she'll tell you, she's told me, and she's pretty honest, she has a fear of death, and it followed her into the birth of our son. and she's actually inside not feeling well right now, and she's asking me if she's going to die. I'm like, baby, you have a cold, it's okay. But it's a real fear that her and other people have, and I think that really facing it on a deep level is really the only way to address it. And as I mentioned in my last video on fear, I think sometimes these are things that have to be addressed with a professional, and some people can't handle these kind of things on their own. And I would recommend to anybody who needs help in some capacity to work through mental or emotional issues to get that help. I think it's very important. And otherwise, I think just keeping the perspective of life and death and this ebb and flow of creation, destruction that follows us and includes us all is something to just be aware of. And even though it's weird to say you appreciate death, I think it's something we should appreciate. This experience, this amazing universe that we've been, brought into. And I think gratitude can help us through any situation, even the fear of something as serious as death. So I think that's going to be it for now. And I'm going to continue my walk with Paulie and enjoy life while we have it here. And I think that's what we all should aspire to do each and every day. So we'll say bye for now, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. So see you later, Paulie. See ya.